All right, we're jumping back in, and this time we have our defending national champion, Georgia Bulldogs. Got to give it to them. I think it was 1980 the last time, and I know you Georgia fans are super pumped that you don't have to say that anymore. Now I can say as of 2021. But here we go, it's 2022. So what does this team look like? I think, team riding high after that win, lost a lot of pieces, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see that from the recruiting rankings that this could be another great team, but lost a lot. And I think the big question nationally is when you're trying to be that first defending, win national championships back to back since I think the 07-08 or 08-09, I always forget, but around that range for Alabama, they're trying to now do that. But the problem for them is they lost a lot of pieces, and those other guys are super talented, but I think we have to acknowledge that that's still a big deal, even for a team like Georgia that's recruiting really well. They returned 7 on offense. They only returned 3, kind of 3 pieces on the defense. Listen to these crazy numbers. They had 15 NFL picks. 15. You start 22, in case we forgot. 5 first-round defenders. 7 defenders in the first 3 rounds. That's insane. They're breaking records. They only gave up 10 points a game last year. They won off of that defense. The offense they made key big plays, but obviously what we're going to remember about that 2021 team is their defense for sure, and a lot of respect for that. I think for this team to do well, it's going to look a little different than it was in the past. So I think the big circle for them is Stetson Bennett is coming back, and some people question it. Maybe you ride off into the sunset. Maybe you go on for that. He wants to cement his legacy as he's not. It comes across to me as someone who's not just a game manager as a quarterback. He is a guy who can play. He's been doubted all his career, all his life. There's a walk-on. Still it felt like it was kind of reluctant from an outside perspective for him to even be the guy. But he's the one, how all these talented guys come in, he's the one that helps lead them to a national championship. And now he's trying to cement his legacy as being one of the greats. And I think there's an opportunity to do that. I think it's a disservice if we just call him a game manager. The dude can play. And especially when you're having to focus on so many other pieces for them, especially with running game, he can play. The stats don't lie. He threw it for 2,800 yards, 29 touchdowns, 200 yards on the ground. He accounted for 3,000 yards on offense. That's nothing to sneeze at. The question for him is, can he keep that going? Was that just a one great year, or is this more of who he is? And I think that's the really big thing for him. And so Todd Monken likes to use a lot of tight ends, and I think, a key player to watch for them. Stetson Bennett is going to help lead the offense, but if I were to circle one guy that's if he can keep building as he goes, is Brock Bowers, the tight end. Guys, he is arguably the best tight end in the country. He led the country for tight ends with receiving yards with 800, and then they have another 2. Awesome guys. They'll probably have maybe 2 or even 3 tight ends at the same time. But, I could argue he's going to win that award. And so when you have a great offensive line, when you have those running backs that are, they're new guys, but when you have all those pieces, I think that's going to be great. I think if Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett have a great year, this team can be very dynamic. You lose a lot of key pieces. You lose Slayer, you lose Davis, you lose Nakobe Dean as a leader of the defense. So they're replacing a lot of pieces. And so, questions for them will be what about the front? What about all those pieces you lost? And I've been hearing this, and I honestly kind of agree, it's losing some of maybe the cornerback pieces, or losing a Darion Kendrick, who came in, transferred from Clemson. A guy like that, and I'm not saying he was all the way super great. He did his job, but it's when they're not as strong in those positions as they were in the defensive front. They have a guy like Jalen Carter, had 8.5 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks. They're going to be strong. They have those guys built in. It's, will will they get the DB corner? Will they get that play strong enough to compete with the likes of like an Alabama, with an Ohio State, those kind of things? I think that's the question. Is we're going from a good to great kind of situation. Like for me, I like the expectation coming in. I would think would be that they're going to win the division again. Is there someone else who's strong enough to compete with them? And if they're playing like they are on paper, I think the answer is it's their division and everyone else is playing for second and having a good year. The question is, are they going to make the playoff again? Are they going to win the SEC officially? They didn't even win it last year. That's the crazy part. As we forget, Alabama actually is the one holding the trophy in Atlanta. And now are they not going to make the playoff? Are they going to win and get a chance to continue to build off of this and fight for another national title? I think that's what we're talking about for them. And it really comes down to, will they be having guys step up? Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton, very explosive, and McIntosh had 5.7 yards per carry. Like they have explosive guys, but will those guys step up when they get more the lion's share of the running game? I can see that being a lot of it. Defensively, I can see they might not be quite as good. You know, I mean, that team last year was just legendary and one like for the record books. And so if this team takes a slight step back, that's not a knock on them. It's just more honoring how good last team's year was. You know, like you can't be that every year. And so I think realistically, but I mean, if say they're keeping teams under 16, 17 points a game, if they're under 20, last year they can show they can be that explosive. They're scoring 38 points a game. So, I mean, that's still going to be a great year. Be interesting for them is, you know, game one on Saturday in Atlanta, they're facing their old defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning. How much of that will be a factor? I mean, I think that's going to be a big storyline. I think maybe less than what people might be all the way expecting because they're going for more of a co-defensive coordinator thing. And I'm imagining they'll switch some things up. But also, sometimes if you know what's coming, it doesn't matter. You still have to stop it. And I think that's a different question for them. Oregon, I mean, I'm not sure how it'll be interesting to see with them, like quarterback wise and just how they are in offense. And we'll get into that later. But I think that's a big game for them. I think how they do at South Carolina is going to be very interesting. That place is going to be hostile. It's going to be they're ready. I think that's a big marker for both their seasons. So, I mean, and they don't get Alabama. They have to go out on the road at Kentucky late in the year, which could be very hostile. So they've got some big away games, especially late in the year. Florida's always big. So I think we're talking like definitely a double-digit, win team. It's just a matter of like, are they going to be like 10-2 after everything, or 11-1 even with like a loss in the SEC title, because everyone's kind of penciling in them and Alabama and who's going to win again. And so obviously if you're trying to make the playoff, I don't know if you can always say that that's the expectation. I don't think that's fair for any team, honestly, to make the playoff, because then when you don't, it's not like a privilege. It's almost like you view it as like it's your right, or like because you're so-and-so, you get it. And I think for them, it's your expectations are you're playing in Atlanta, you're in it with Alabama again. And as it's shown, it comes down to a few plays, and they're going to be even stronger. Give yourself a fighting chance and give yourself the wiggle room. So even if you lose that game, of course you don't go into any games trying to lose, but I'm saying if you're going into it undefeated, you could take a loss, still be in the playoff, and do what they did again last year. But if you have a loss out of Kentucky, out of South Carolina, you can't afford to lose that game more than likely and be in the playoff. So I think that's the expectation for them is, what is this defense always going to look like? And I think we'll figure that out once we get into the season, of course. But I think this is going to be a little bit more offensively focused team, because you have these guys stepping up. You've got Brooks, you've got McConkey, Adonai Mitchell. Like those guys, I think will step up, and you'll see a little bit more offensive led, and maybe a little bit less pressure on the defense. But that's what I'm really interested in, is that can they avoid losing one of the schedule? Can they avoid the hiccup? Have they taken that transition to being consistent with that year by year to make the playoff? So there you go. I think it's been a great year for Georgia, but it's be interesting. Will they make the playoff? And I think that's the big question for them. So